Good morning, everybody. Finance Committee meeting. The topic is personnel and technology. And just pass it right on over.
Good morning. Thank you. We're going to begin first with the technology program. Mr. Frazier is going to go through that. The technology department, I guess, we only notice them sort of when something goes wrong. And because they're not out there in terms of, being visible, like, whether it's teaching or whether it's, athletics or so forth and so on. But it's an integral part of being able to do business and also provide instructional support in the classroom. Again, while these presentations are done sort of departmentally, they're not done in isolation. The departments don't work as silos. So you're constantly going to see cross discussions, whether it be curriculum items that show up in technology, or technology items that show up in curriculum and special education and so forth and so on. And you'll see some of that today. And there's also be some redundancy because of that. So with that, Mr. Frazier.
Good morning. Before I get in trouble with my own folks, let me turn on that mic. Good morning. Just in fact, speaking of my folks, the first slide we have is just a quick organizational chart. The Information Systems Department has 21 employees, 2 administrators, 2 administrative assistants, 2 database analysts, 1 who handles student information systems, 1 who handles more of our operational databases. We have 1 web developer. We have 3 network technicians. They're the folks who keep things running on a day-to-day basis. 2 video technicians who you probably know the best. That's Jim and Mike, who you see regularly supporting us for meetings like this. And then we round out the department with 3 desktop technicians and 6 information technology support technicians. It's the 6 technicians that are in the buildings that you may see from time to time there. For example, we have a technician in each of the tech centers in the high schools. This slide, sure.
Is there any way to get this put into board docs as we are speaking? I don't see it there now, and I'm sorry, my glasses aren't strong enough to read some of that print.
Lynn Pringle can put it in, can't she? The board docs? Right now. Why don't you email it to, it's not in board docs.
This presentation's not in board docs.
Yeah,
Actually,
get a copy of it, board docs.
Could you each email them to Lynn, and then Lynn will put them on? He wants to hold?
No.
I think we can turn around and look at this. Maybe some of the print is too small for my old eyes, but I'll turn around so that we can continue.
That's not going to help. She'll see this one.
I'll look at that one. That's fine.
No, no, it's fine. It's just, you got a lot of little print in there, George?
I do. I'm emailing it to Lynn Pringle.
Okay.
Right now.
Why don't we just hold up for a sec? You can stop the tape for a moment while we get this loaded.
Take 2. Good morning. Just to kick things off, we have an organizational chart. There are 21 employees in the Information Systems Department, 2 administrators, 2 administrative assistants, 2 database analysts, 1 who primarily handles student information systems, another who handles primarily operational databases. We have 1 web developer you'll hear more about as we go through some of the work that they're doing. We have 3 network technicians. They're the folks who are the heart of keeping things running on a day-to-day basis. 2 video technicians who you probably know best. That's Jim and Mike, who support meetings like this. And then we round things out with 3 desktop technicians who primarily serve as help desk, and we have 6 information technology support technicians, and they're the folks that are in the building. They're more on-site help desk. They're the ones who are supporting teachers and administrators and support staff day to day. If you've been to either of the high school tech centers, you've met one of our ITSTs, as we call them. We have one permanently stationed in each of the tech centers. So the high schools have a full-time ITST, where the other 8 buildings share ITSTs. You want me to just keep moving on and we'll stop if there's questions? Okay. I do apologize. This slide is a little hard to see. This is fundamentally the budget for this coming fiscal year. This is the general fund. And I'm going to cover some of these areas throughout the PowerPoint. I'm going to highlight some of these areas. For example, the largest you can see there is instructional computers and one-to-one. That's the largest share of the IS department budget annually. It hovers around $2 million annually. The next largest amount of money you see there is hardware and software maintenance. And again, I'm going to cover some of those other areas that are reflected in this budget graphic. Okay. Moving on. Jump right in. So instructional computers and one-to-one. So just to break out the percentages of where is that $2 million going next fiscal year. You can see there the percentages of how the money's being broken out next year. Now, I just want to point out that that's not consistent year to year. Where the money is shared between elementary and middle schools, for example, will peak and valley. And it really depends on how much equipment needs to be refreshed at a particular level. So we may have more equipment that needs to be refreshed at the middle school one year, so you'll see more money going to those buildings, less at an elementary building. For example, district-wide, like there's a large bubble of teachers who refresh their equipment around the same time. So those numbers won't be consistent year to year, but overall, we spend about 50% of our budget on instructional computers and one-to-one. The high school is a little bit more consistent because it has a one-to-one program. So incoming freshmen, as I'm sure you're well aware, they receive a new computer. That's their computer to use for the next 4 years. So the spending at the high school is a little bit more consistent. It goes up occasionally when we refresh something like a tech ed lab. You'll see a little bit more spending at a high school, but for the most part, the high school remains fairly consistent. The picture there is actually a first grader using an iPad, and that kind of segues me to this next slide, because we are refreshing the iPads at the elementary school level. The iPads are deployed at the K and 1 levels. We've been refreshing those over the last 2 years. The original iPad 2s are no longer supported and are no longer receiving software upgrades, so we're refreshing those. As well at the elementary level, we're refreshing MacBooks. I want to point out the printer-on cost there. What printer-on allows us to do is it allows iOS devices to print to our legacy workgroup printers. You may or may not be aware the iOS devices like iPads has a specific printing protocol, AirPrint. We did not want to purchase all new printers for iPads to print, so we were able to find a product that allows iOS devices to print, and therefore we were able to continue using our legacy printers. Some other highlights in the instructional computers and one-to-one budget.
Legacy printer is?
The workgroup printers that you see around the district, and they are getting to be legacy. We're still standing strong on not purchasing workgroup printers. We haven't. I want to say we've only purchased new workgroup printers where we've had like a new group of classes built. For example, we did purchase workgroup printers for Welsh Valley when they opened up the new building, but we have not been purchasing workgroup printers. We're continuing to try to get people to use the copiers more. We're continuing to try to get people to use electronic exchange of information as opposed to printing it. In fact, a huge success, and it'll come up in a later slide, is the work that Kimberly Fraser's been doing to make IEPs strictly electronic as opposed to printing those. So just as a great success of going electronic. Some other highlights, we're refreshing Chromebooks in the middle schools. I'm sorry?
What grades use Chromebooks?
Well, they started off in sixth grade, primarily because of an electronic textbook called History Alive. But we're seeing more and more use of Chromebooks throughout all the grade levels in the middle schools. And it'll come out in a couple slides here very quickly about the ratio of devices to students. The middle school principals wanted to increase the ratio of devices to students, so instead of purchasing MacBooks, they started using that money to purchase Chromebooks, which they could buy 4 to 1. So we're seeing a larger number of Chromebooks at the middle school across grade levels. The high schools, this is pretty static cost, year to year, approximately 700 MacBooks, laptop insurance, laptop covers, and the copiers. Each of the high schools has copiers dedicated to the one-to-one programs where students can print. It's not, usually the question I get is it like college where we limit the number of pages that a student can use per semester? We don't. But what we do is require the students to release a print. So if they send something to the printer and they forget it or really don't want it, it'll eventually time out and we'll leave the queue or drop from the queue. So we have it similar to a college campus where students would go out and release a print. We don't limit the amount of paper they can use, but we do require them to release the print to get it. We have budgeted for enrollment for this coming year. Enrollment increases. We are anticipating a reserve of 100 laptops that we will. We use the 10th day enrollment to identify how many students are at each building, and then we use that as a ratio to push the laptops out to ensure equity.
Hold on, before you
Sure.
just go on. Did you have a question?
No, we're trying to find. I just wanted to let her know that it's online now.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, I have actually two questions on the side.
Sure.
One, the not limiting the student printing, do we monitor it at all? Like, can we tell whether a student is printing up things for some activity that they're doing at home? Do we know, I mean, is there any monitoring at all of how students use the printers?
There's some capability to do that. For example, if a student created a flyer for some home yard sale, and they called the document 1, we would see that they printed document 1. We wouldn't know the content that it was a flyer for a yard sale. So it's not exact in that we can see what a student is printing.
Do we know how many sheets each student prints?
We can get that data. We can pull that data.
Is it ever reviewed?
It has been reviewed on occasion when there's been suspicion that there's been someone taking advantage of the copiers. It's not something that we look at on a regular basis. It's not something that we review on a regular basis, but it's similar to student browsing. If there's a request for something like that, we'll look into it, but we're not,
I mean,
we're not,
it's a tiny number in the scheme of things, but, you know, people tend to just print things off and say, oh, I don't want those, or I made some mistake, I'm gonna print off another 20 copies of it. And,
right.
you know, I just think if we could get a handle on that. The other question I had, the laptop insurance. Now, this is $32,500. Is that the money that's the students pay?
So that's for the laptop premium, and that's the $70. I apologize, I'm just trying to get a note. Oh, okay. I'm sure Jim and Mike are thinking, use the mic. Did you get a note? Any?
No,
No?
We did go.
earlier though.
I am disappointed. I just want to take a note of what you're asking for.
Okay.
Printing. So the insurance, each student pays a $70 premium for the insurance, except for students receiving free and reduced lunch, we pay for. But that's the anticipated cost annually for insurance. So we pay the insurance, and the insurance is reimbursed by the students. I don't know. Hopefully
Okay, so
that
that's
answers-
not a net number. The net's significantly lower, it's 700, let's call it a 600 times $70, no, it's.
No,
that'd be
that's for all
42,000.
students. That's 9 through 12.
Right,
Well, that would be, I mean, we have, I'm sorry.
I just
Right.
want to wait till you.
Right.
I apologize.
Yeah, hold on,
I guess-
go ahead, finish your comment.
The question is the 32,500 our actual expenditures, or is this going to be offset with the parent contribution?
So what it is
Your mic.
the 32,000 is what the district pays for students who are on free and reduced lunch and for the spare laptops. So that's what the funds that districts are paying out. In addition to that, the parents pay $70 for the insurance above that. So the total bill is a couple $100,000. Parents pay X amount of dollars. The balance is what the district pays to subsidize free and reduced lunch and to pay for the what do you call it, the loaner laptops. If this laptop breaks, it goes out for repair, and then we give the student a loaner while the repair is being done. So we have to pay for those. So that's what that figure is.
Okay, so we don't self-insure the laptops?
I'm sorry?
I thought we self-insured
No, we
the
don't.
laptops.
No.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on this slide?
Thank you. I think earlier on this slide, you talked about some of your, I think MacBooks becoming obsolete in that they're not getting upgrades or service upgrades.
The iPads.
iPads, thank you. My understanding is one reason that we need to upgrade is if Apple's no longer providing support, we now start having more secured potential of security breaches because the security packs aren't coming anymore. Is that a true statement?
That is true. It's whenever a company stops patching or updating their software, any vulnerabilities that come out are not being fixed. I hope that we don't have any K1 grade hackers that we would have to worry about that. So I don't know that I could say to you we have a security concern with the iPads at this grade level, but what you're saying is very true across the board with everything else.
Well, I think, to me, just sitting where I'm at, holding on to too many laptops that are way out of date is not a secure practice. And I'm also recognizing when you're in our networks are secure. So generally, there's definitely a level of security within our buildings.
Right.
But I'm also suggesting that it's not prudent, in my opinion, to hold on to iPads that are way past due in great numbers. We're risking a security breach, I believe.
And that's very true. And we've had that situation happen where where we've had hardware because of a program that's running on it that we haven't been able to upgrade. So we end up having to come up with what's called a compensated control to ensure that we're somehow mitigating that vulnerability. So what you're describing is on the mark.
Thank you.
Certainly. Any other questions? I can take a break and do that if you want.
I can have it done.
You can do it?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
The 700 laptops, that's for one grade, correct, for high school?
That's ninth grade in both high schools. Okay, so just to try to explain that a little bit further, and just the picture there are some middle school, or actually that's fifth grade students using Chromebooks. But just to explain a little bit further, in an effort to create equity across the buildings and across grade levels, we developed this ratio idea. So if the high schools are 1-to-1, a ratio of 1 computer per student, our goal ratio at the middle school was 1.5 students to device. And then at the elementary level, 2 students to a device. So our goal is to ensure that we're at that ratio or better. Now, that works very well if you say the only thing we're going to buy are MacBooks, because a MacBook costs $1,150. So in essence, we're saying we're going to buy 1 MacBook for every 2 elementary students. We're going to buy 1 MacBook for every 1.5 middle school students and 1 MacBook per student at the high school. But that locks the buildings into staying with a single technology. We wanted to be able to give the buildings the opportunity to work with different technologies to meet their curricular needs and their curricular goals. So we've stayed with the idea of budgeting $1,150 in that ratio, but we're allowing the buildings to spend that money how they think it should be best spent. As an example, the middle schools are using that $1,150 to buy Chromebooks. At the elementary level, buildings are using that $1,150 to buy iPads at K1 and 2, and Chromebooks in grades 5 and some in 4. So we've maintained the budget of a Mac laptop, but we're allowing the buildings to spend that how they think best to meet their instructional and curricular needs and goals.
So this budget number means what?
So
Is that $2.7 million, or is that $2,798 a student? Or, I mean, I don't understand what that column means.
Okay, so that's, so at the easiest thing to look at is the high school. So fundamentally, we're saying there's 2,659 students presently. When I did this, there were 2,659 students in the high school. We're a little bit better. The number of devices per student, that if you look to the far right, you'll see it's 0.95. So that's actually better than 1-to-1 computers to students. And the reason for that is like tech ed labs, as an example. So what we do to maintain equity throughout the district is we've said, okay, we're going to allow the ratio to drive the amount of money that we give to each of the grade levels. So at the high school, we provide $1,150 per student. Now, they don't get that every year. They only get that.
I'm sorry for
Sure.
interrupting you. Really, all I need to know, is that $2,798?
No,
That's the number of devices
correct.
at $1,150 each?
Correct. That's how much we budget for those devices.
Okay, thank you. That's all I need.
Certainly. This is unless you've done this for several years, this is a new idea on how to maintain equity throughout the district. Are there other questions about this?
Yeah, I apologize if you're going to get to this later, but how do we monitor and watch how how often they're being used? Like, I know once you have them, you might use them more, so you can't test the first year, but are we watching how the students' use is changing over years and like looking at the expense of certain devices versus their use? Does that make sense, what I'm asking? I know
Sure.
at first there was there was very little content, and now there's more and more content and hopefully less and less paper, but how are we sort of tracking that progress in our programs?
So, I mean, I don't have any measures to give you saying like students are using their laptops for 6 hours a day. It's more anecdotal. But I just, and I'll ask for the help of some of the other folks at the table today. But as an example, we're seeing an increase in electronic textbooks. We're seeing an increase in the use of learning management system, Blackboard. We're seeing an increase on different products that curriculums in the buildings are asking to use with the students with the technology. So we're seeing a steady growth of the amount of technology that's being accessed through the laptops. Another example is Google Drive. The initial idea of using an online office suite was a new idea a few years ago, and now it's used widely for collaboration between the students. So I don't have a number for you that says students are using the devices 6 hours a day, but I think there's plenty of anecdotal examples that would illustrate how students are using the technology.
Just to add to that, it doesn't directly address your question, Dr. O'Leary, but as far as systematically gathering the data, but I can say that every teacher goes through the teacher evaluation process. That's part of the ongoing conversations and goal setting for teachers, is how they're growing their skill set in the use of instructional technology in the classroom, how are they using the technology to enhance instruction. So it's part of it's not only a professional expectation for each teacher, but it's part of classroom observation and part of their professional growth plans.
To also elaborate a bit on that, we have teachers in place at each level. One person for the elementary buildings who support teachers, along with the tech tutors that also support teachers around the implementation of technology integration in their classrooms. At the middle school, we have teachers who on a prep time and have some time built into their schedule during the day to offer support to teachers as well for technology integration. So if a teacher would like to see how to apply a particular piece of technology or try something different with a smart board, they can do that. And we have one person at each one of our high schools to support the one-to-one for students and teachers through their technology integration. So we also have supports built in from a professional learning standpoint that those people are in the buildings to help with the technology through embedded practices.
So are smart boards in this number?
No. This is just student
the
devices.
one-to-ones, yeah.
Yeah, this is devices in the hands of students.
And so I'm just doing the math here. This is not a yearly number then, this is a 4-year number or
That's
a renewal number or whatever.
There you go. Ideally, in an ideal world, we would be refreshing 25% of the technology in buildings. But it peaks and valleys. So, and that's because, as an example, one building may have a lot of technology that needs to be refreshed, where another building does not. So we don't replace the equipment until it's seen its useful life cycle. But yes, in an ideal world, it would be 25%. a different look at, a different view on this is the actual number of devices to students. And again, this is, it's a little bit different because if you look at the middle school, you'll see that it looks like we have better than one device per student. And presently we do. But that's because the middle school principals took that $1,150, it would normally be the cost of refreshing a MacBook, and said, hey, we can buy 4 Chromebooks for the cost of that one MacBook. So they've been purchasing Chromebooks to increase the ratio of devices to students. That does not change our budget. Our budget remains the same. We budget $1,150 per 1.5 students at the middle school level, which they get, again, in a perfect world, it would be 25% of that a year. So that's how we've been trying to maintain equity in the buildings in terms of the budget.
So just for the sake of math,
Sure.
which we all love, right? That comes to, if you take the total students times the price per, the number per student that we're allotting, you get about $6.9 million. You divide that by 4, you get 1.7. So 1.7 is sort of, I know there's fluctuation, the yearly cost that we spend on individual student devices.
That you're on the mark. If I went back 3 slides and we added into it insurance, covers, printer-on software, and other peripherals that go around supporting those instructional devices, you would get to that $2 million.
Okay, so that's one thing that's kind of, it's less unique to Lower Merion than it was 8 years ago, but that's a fairly unique thing to Lower Merion.
1-to-1?
Yeah.
Well,
That's what I'm saying, not as much as it used to be, but the fact that we supply the computer to all the students, is that you know?
Seeing more and more one-to-one.
if you drive up the road, Upper Marion, it's laptop 1-to-1 at the high school, iPads at the middle school. TE is Dell's. Radnor is iPads. Dell's in the high school, Radnor's iPads in the high school, but they're looking to move away from iPads to computers. So you're on the mark.
I started iPads in Chamonix before I left.
Right, iPads are considerably less expensive than.
Well, I'm just saying.
I guess the point of my question is, we constantly get, why is your cost per student so much higher than school district X, Y, and Z? And I'm wondering whether this is one of the elements to that answer.
I'd say, I'm hearing more and more secondary schools having one-to-ones. But I'd say the difference may be in the support we get in the elementaries. Is that fair to say?
I don't have a good answer for you there, Mr. Copeland. I don't know. The way to, let me say that back. So what is the count of computers per student in the elementary levels in other districts? I don't have a good answer for that.
I think to get to your point, from my experience, the one-to-ones are becoming more commonplace.
Yes.
But I'm not sure that I've seen as much support at the elementary level in other districts that I've been associated with. So I'd say that's, to me, where the strength is. Having said that, where you're going to see some price variation is the fact that I think Lower Merion's using the Apple product, which is going to be more costly than, say, if you went to a PC. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
Okay, so in the interest of meeting discipline, and I'm the biggest offender of this, I noticed you have almost 20 slides left, so I'm not going to ask any more questions till the end. I'm going to ask everyone else if they'll do the same, and we'll just let you go through your presentation, so thanks.
Okay. So this slide here, again, using that 2 million number as a baseline for what we're spending on instructional technology, this slide here shows our anticipated enrollment growth cost. So we're anticipating, you can see the next column there, we're anticipating roughly $200,000 in additional cost in 18-19 for enrollment growth, and then you can read those numbers across. But we are anticipating, I am anticipating needing additional funds for enrollment growth to maintain the ratios that we currently have.
So from time to time, we've talked about what the cost of enrollment growth is, and I think business office says, it's about an average of 1% a year. It's not going to be the same every year. And so I think last year you had a bump up. This next budget year, not so much, but he's anticipating a bump up the following year. So it's not a nice linear line. In his budget, you're going to see some fits and starts.
So just to try to give you a snapshot of the total number of devices in the district, the column on the left is devices that are connected to our network. And you can see there, as an example, we have 6,710 Macs. We have over 1,000 iPads and iPods. We're nearing 2,000 Chromebooks. And then it continues on from there. Again, just to give you an idea of the amount of equipment that we're supporting. On the right-hand side, equipment that we are supporting but not connected to our network, or software that runs across our network. And you can see the numbers there. We are the equivalent of a medium-sized enterprise. If you were to describe our technology and you took out if you didn't explain to someone that our product is lifelong learners, and you were to describe what it is that we're doing day to day, we are the equivalent of a medium-sized enterprise. So I like to point out just how big an operation it is. This was fondly referred to as sand art. This is not a graphic of my summer sand art efforts, but this is an illustration of the number of help desk tickets that we've had in a 9-month period from July 1st through to March 31st. That large peak there represents August through October. Just to put some numbers around that, over that 9-month period, that's 9,593 tickets. So in a 9-month period, nearly 10,000 help desk tickets. Between September 1st and October 31st, we had 3,528 help desk tickets. That's approximately 17 help desk tickets per month. So it's again illustrating that it's a large operation. Those are some of the numbers that I just offered. In addition to nearly 10,000 help desk tickets in a 9-month period, also some hardware repairs that we've conducted in that same period of time. We did bring hardware repair in-house. Previously, we were using Chester County IU, who had stopped its courier service. The expectation is that we would drive our hardware repairs to Chester County for repairs. And then we also brought in warranty repairs. We had one of our desktop technicians get Apple warranty certified. So we brought all those repairs in-house. And as a very, very, very conservative estimate, we have saved 856 days of equipment being out of service in a 9-month period. So we're returning equipment to service 856 days sooner. So what does that look like for the teacher who has a cart, who's relying on having a number of devices to teach a lesson? We're keeping that cart fully full to capacity sooner than we were when we were using outsource warranty and outsource out of warranty repairs. Another thing that I thought this group would appreciate hearing, because for a couple of years you heard me coming to you talking about SharePoint, purchasing SharePoint, constituting a SharePoint team. The SharePoint team consists of our web developer and our 2 data analysts. And so the next 5 slides, and I'll move through them quickly, and I'll just touch on some highlights, but the next 5 slides show in-house solutions that we've developed using that technology and that team. And again, I thought this group would appreciate hearing it, because you heard me ask for the money to do this. Now I want to show you what we did with it. So in human resources, some of the solutions that we've developed is new onboarding of employees, employee clearances, tuition reimbursement forms, salary adjustment forms. As an example, the business office, we've created a contract tracking solution for them. We were a nutritional services catering form, transportation, new employee onboarding and document scanning again. In student services, I do want to point out and tie this back to a previous slide. Through Kimberly Fraser's efforts and the efforts of the SharePoint team, we're no longer printing IEPs. I don't know how many trees we've saved, but it's a considerable forest. Kimberly, you might have a number that, but not to put you on the spot, but we are definitely doing our part to save trees there. In addition to that, new course request form, digital resource tracking form are both new solutions that we've developed at the elementary level. Achievement team forms at the high school level, teacher recommendation forms through a lot of automated weekly reporting that they ask for, student intervention tracking forms. Like what's really satisfying for my folks and for me is we're getting more into, like, I don't want to say real time, but close to real time reporting. So like, how's this student doing? And we're developing solutions to provide that information to our administrators to help them identify students that may be struggling. Electronic transcripts, and you can see the remainder there. I appreciate it that Ben has an ear for security, and I just want to talk about that for a second. This is some other costs that are in that donut illustration, security and compliance. This is just some of the places that the budget goes to, and so antivirus in an enterprise this large, $39,000 a year. The web filter, to be in compliance with the Children's Internet Protection Act, $52,000 a year. Does not have a number attached to it, but something that has become time-consuming is evaluating software for COPA and FERPA compliance, evaluating products that we're purchasing to ensure that they have security and compliance for confidential PII data that we may be giving, our employee PII data that we may be giving to vendors, ensuring that they're in compliance. So just wanted to give you a snapshot of where some of that cost goes. Security overall is becoming more time-consuming for my team. Just as an example, over the last 18 months, we've had several incidents, and an incident is defined where we have to actually mobilize, where our focus becomes whatever that security event is. Some of the things that we've handled over the 18 months, website defacement, rogue devices on the network. We've had countless phishing attacks, countless, countless is a little bit of an exaggeration. I'm sorry, Mr. Copeland?
Define a phishing attack, just in case someone's watching.
Certainly. So a phishing attack is where some miscreant on the internet will email employees of the district and say something like, your email account's about to expire. In order to keep your email working, please send me your account credentials. These nefarious actors are creating emails well enough that it looks like it's coming in from someone internally.
I've had 2 occasions where someone has used my name to ask Vic to wire money.
Wow.
And it'll, because it says Victor, would you please, he's like, who's who calls me Victor? But it comes from an LMSD account that looks like my account.
So in addition to that, over the last 9 months, we've had 385 events. Now, an event leads up to an incident. Event is something's happening, we need to look into it, let's confirm that there's actually a security incident. So I don't want to say an event's a false positive. It may be an event is happening, but it's being blocked by one of our security devices, or it's being thwarted by our antivirus, as an example. So over the last 9 months, my team has investigated 385 events. From some of those events, we've had these incidents that I shared with you. Other places in the budget donut, hardware and software maintenance, some cost that I hope you'll recognize. As an example, Adobe Creative Cloud. Adobe Creative Cloud is the Adobe suite of products. You'll recognize it, like Photoshop is probably the most recognizable of the Adobe products. The picture on the right there, I thought illustrated the use of Adobe Photoshop extremely well. You could see that this is actually from a Harrington art class. It's a picture of 2 young persons, and their heads have been replaced with you could see the flowers there. But that's an example that I thought we would easily connect to with Adobe Creative Cloud. Microsoft, that cost is for all of our Microsoft products. So it's the PowerPoint that I'm using right now. It's for the Office suite that's on student laptops. It's for the servers running in the background. We have over, I think, close to 170 servers. Most of those servers are running Microsoft products. Smart notebook software. We often associate smart notebook software with the smart board products. It was originally connected to that. The product has actually grown to become its own standalone product. Very, very popular at the elementary and middle school level. We do see some use at the high school level. What we see, one example that I've seen recently that it's being used for is for formative assessments. So a teacher is able to use a smart notebook software to develop a quiz, for example, an online quiz, and that can be easily shared with students who can take the quiz and use other devices like a Chromebook or a laptop or even an iPad. Another annual cost is our PowerSchool student information system. Just to give you an example of one of the things that we're doing with PowerSchool that's very timely is we're expanding access to PowerSchool to elementary parents and guardians. Shortly, there will be a letter going home inviting elementary parents and guardians to set up a PowerSchool parent portal account so that they can access information such as transportation, update their emergency contact information, and even a teacher assignment. I don't want to rush past this slide. I don't know if some of our curriculum folks want to add anything here. This would be the. I'll keep going. So new initiatives. We're looking to add an AV system to the Lower Merion High School. That library is used quite extensively for professional development and other meetings, so we're hoping to put an AV system in there. We're also looking to purchase a telepresence robot. We have had situations where we've had sick children. We've kind of adapted and overcome by using laptops on carts with Skype. It's cumbersome. Really doesn't. There's much better technologies like the Vigo telepresence robot that would help connect the student that is at home due to an illness to connect to class.
You see the child's face would appear, and the child from home can walk around the class with the robot. This is my idea, so I don't want anybody making fun of.
So, this may sound silly, but does someone accompany that through the school throughout the day? Is that the idea?
No, the student can walk down the halls.
And up the stairs?
No, but we would have an elevator if they chose to go there. But I mean,
I think it
see,
sounds
you
like
should have put a picture of my robot in there.
Yes, sir.
great
I-
experiment. I think it's fine, thank you.
I think I'd play sick just so I could play with the robot.
Keep going.
Okay. Also wanted to point out another line item in our budget is training. We annually internally conduct policy training and procedure training for my folks, but I do encourage my folks to take training to pursue certifications, to expand their technical capabilities as much as possible. Some of the training, however, is just to keep us moving forward. For example, annually, our student information system database analyst goes to the Pennsylvania Department of Education Data Summit. Recently, we've had to funnel a couple people through web accessibility compliance training for ADA compliance. With that growing amount of security-related concerns, I'm getting people to go to security training. We do have a dedicated training budget, and it's important that we keep those people current on the technology that we need to support and how to keep it secure. Just another number here in the that budget illustration: telecom, internet, and fiber optic. We have what's called a metropolitan area network. We have fiber optics between all of our buildings. The cost to maintain that fiber optics annually is $69,000. Internet and DDoS mitigation, $60,000. And the school messenger service, that's the thing that you hear early in the morning saying we have a late opening, $15,000. Just to transition a little bit to capital reserve. You've seen this illustration many times, but I keep going back to this illustration because I hope that you'll see that there's different parts of the network. I know we keep using the word network, but the network actually is made up of distinctive parts. There's the core of the network, which is located here in our data center. That network rides over that fiber optic network to 14 locations. In each of those locations, there's 71 telecommunication closets total, where we have 630 Wi-Fi access points, where there's 13,000 devices connected to that network, either through the access points or directly wired. Just another view of the network. This illustration shows how all that comes back to our data center, which is, again, located here, and those nearly 200 servers, both physical and virtual, that we maintain on a daily basis. This is the 5-year obsolescence plan. Much of it is directly connected to the network. As an example, recently in the facilities and purchasing meeting, I brought forth the wireless layer replacement, and that's part of that E-rate reimbursement that I discussed. I hope to bring forward the first phase of upgrading our phone system. That's those next 3 bullets. The following year, we're looking to replace the core, which will have been in service for 8 years. Our firewall and IPS, again, 8 years. 19 and 20, hope to replace the distribution layer, again, 8 years of service. The air conditioning in the data center. We really don't think about that. We don't think about the environmental controls for that much equipment, but that is something that we need to look to refresh. And then you can see it goes out 20, 21, 21, 22. And that brings me to.
Can I just?
Yes, sir.
And so this is largely part of your 5-year capital reserve?
That is the 5-year capital reserve.
This is, when folks say, well, what do you do with that? Well, these are itemized things that are planned based on monies that get transferred into capital reserve.
Right, and we do the 5-year plan with technology, we also do it with facilities.
We also do it with facilities and transportation.
Are those 5-year plans accessible on our?
Well, they're accessible
web.
in that they've been presented to the board and they're in board docs. I suppose we could,
Different facility means we've had presentations, not like George has done, and Pat, that has had what their plan is, so
Right.
it is available.
But one of the comments Monday night was, a woman said, you should have a 5-year facilities expenditure plan, and, in the interest of keeping things moving, we didn't stop to say, hello, we do have a 5-year facilities plan. So, but it should be easily searchable. Like, you shouldn't have to go onto board docs and then figure out what meeting it was presented in and find it that way. So Doug has stepped out, but I think it'd be very valuable if there were a way that you could find that quickly.
maybe we could put it on each department's website too, or something like that.
Right, something so that when I go into the little search bar, I say 5-year facilities plan, it pops up.
And I do think it's do you put it as part of your budget book?
In the budget book, there is information about what capital improvements are going to be upcoming year.
All right, we'll see what we can do. Yeah, okay.
Great, thank you, George. Anybody questions for George Suva? Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation.
Certainly.
One of the questions that I had immediately was, is there redundancy built into the staffing? Because we have redundancy in the technology side of it, I know, based on previous conversations with you.
Redundancy as in a mirror or.
No, not completely, but.
Well, we do try to cross-train. Do I need to dedicate more time to cross-training? I do. So I can't, there are key players on my team that if they were suddenly not available, it would be a problem. But we've recognized the need for more cross-training and hope to do that.
Okay, Maureen?
I have, it's not as much a question as maybe a comment. I haven't seen budgeting, like we're using the cost of a computer at the high school to budget for technology for elementary school students. And I would prefer to see that done by a need across classrooms rather than a price set at the, and I know it's somewhat translated with your 2-to-1 ratio. But I guess I'd like to see that move towards something that's more need-driven on the individual level than flowing down from a high school number, if that makes sense.
It does, and I guess you could argue pluses and minuses for both ways of doing it. This way, at least we have an identifiable number, and then we say to the school, okay, but you have some flexibility in terms of what you do with that. So there's the sort of the building base, but somehow giving us an opportunity to make it more of a guarantor than when you have fluctuations.
Yeah, so, and that makes sense to me. Like, I think that's fine, but then going along with that, I think we would need to really make sure that we're aware of the use of all of these and that we're actually not over or under buying.
Sure.
Yeah, and we don't want to create a situation with, oh, I have $1,150. I'm going to buy these 3 products because I can buy these 3 products for that price because you get that allotment rather than because there's a need for that.
Yeah, I go back and forth on this. When we look at the buildings, we tend to do a per capita And then the assistant superintendent sits with each building principal to make sure that the per capita fits within the needs of the overall. Doing a zero-based for schools sometimes ends up creating huge discrepancies, although when we talk about staffing, you'll see where we've planned some discrepancies based on the needs of the school. That's number one. Number two, I do think, one of the things I'm pleased about when I visit the schools, I see the technology being used well, and I think that's positive. I will say that I think we need to be more deliberate in what our expectations are. You know, what does every kid get, as opposed to somewhat based on who they get in terms of building a program. The last thing I'd say on it is we do have situations where people don't just spend to the end. And so I review them, and we sometimes will say no to spending to the end, to your point that you just get an allocation and so forth. So we get a per capita, but it's not an unrestricted per capita. But I hear your point. I mean, I think it's something we can explore going forward.
And also, if I may add, probably the single chief complaint I receive is we don't have enough technology at the middle school and the elementary schools. I've never received we're good. We have enough. I've never received that. And also, we're looking at the network from the point of view of, are all the devices there? Are they all checked in? Are they all patched? Are they all up to date? And when we see something that doesn't look like it's been up to date recently, we zero in on that, and we help the buildings adjust the computers around the building so that they're being maximized. So our intent is not a curriculum oversight. It turns into a curriculum oversight because we're helping them move the computers around the building to be maximized. So just, again, anecdotally, the chief complaint is we need more. It's never been, we're good.
Anybody? So I have two questions. One, regarding security, and, you know, we talked about, you know, the phishing stuff and what have you. Do we train the students on how to identify those situations and what they should and shouldn't do in those situations?
Train the students on phishing?
Yeah. Like, okay, you know, if you get an email that asks for your login information, you should check with the teacher before you give it out, for example, or whatever. I mean, because, you know, number one, it's a life skill, which we might as well teach them while we have them. And number two, it protects the school district from, you know, potential attacks.
I can't point to any place that type of training has taken place. I don't know if Scott, if you're aware of.
Not specifically, but there is annual one-to-one
Yeah,
training
that's what I
for
thought,
students. So
That's at
students
the high school.
At the high school, students are trained annually. So and
Well-
We can
We
look
could-
to
we
make
could
sure
add
that
to
that's
it.
part of the
I mean,
component.
it really should be. I mean, I had mentioned in the curriculum that we should be teaching the kids how to identify fake news, but we should also be teaching them how to identify and avoid these sorts of situations. The middle schoolers have a technology class. I mean, this should be in the curriculum of that class, is how to
there is a
identify
digital
those
citizenship component to the program, so that's not absent from the program. But I don't know specifically about the phishing.
Well, I think the phishing, because those kids can go home and teach their parents, I think, be a real value to the community.
Certainly.
My other question is, so you had that little donut chart in the very beginning of the presentation that gives you a breakdown, I guess, of the major, 10 or 12 subject lines or itemized.
Yep.
But nowhere in the presentation do we have an overall itemized budget from technology department. So as you went through your procedure, you said, oh, we have, you know, $20,000 for this and $60,000 for that. And I'd love to see, and I'm sure it's somewhere in the materials that we have. I'm sure if I dug hard enough, I would find it. But, you know, I'd love to see what your itemized total technology budget is. So what's the bottom line on the technology budget? 3.9 million?
That is.
So I don't know if you can find that. That's more a spreadsheet that takes this donut and maybe itemizes it a little bit in terms of what your presentation shares.
Certainly.
Okay. Anybody else? Sure.
This might be for you, Bob, is George's, I'm trying to get my head around as we're going forward 5 years out. Do you have any, as much as you can peer into a crystal ball, where Lower Merion may no longer be a paper textbook-based school and become totally, I hear there's always this push, but I'm never sure we start, or not just we, I think this is a nationwide thing of step forward, maybe a step, no, it's not. I don't know if you have a sense of that going forward.
I think virtually every, I think we'll eventually get to the point where there's no longer a textbook adoption. It'll be some sort of information system or so forth and so on. I would argue that there's more and more a hybrid of technology and print medium. Is that fair to say? And I don't know that there's any series that we purchase that does not have that. Now, I can remember 7 or 8 years ago, the benefit was, particularly for middle schoolers who were carrying their books home, one of the things I used to do is I would purchase a class set and then a home set and tell the kids take the book and leave it home because of the weight of the book. Now much of that is on technology. So looking forward, I don't know. I mean, I see a dwindling and I see an acceleration of students using technology where they were once using textbooks.
Just a comment on that. The current, our generation did not have this kind of technology at all, right? The current generation has that hybrid. The studies that I've seen show that using physical paper and pen improves education, improves the learning ability, and I think maybe in another generation we'll have worked ourselves through that it's not. But at this point in time, the kids we have right now definitely need the tactile piece as well as the computer piece. Some kids struggle completely trying to read. And I mean, just think about reading the newspaper. I read the newspaper online. Well, if I read it in the paper form, you can flip back and forth really quickly. You can scan a whole sheet. There's a lot of things you can do with a piece of paper that you can't do with a computer. That's very hard to do with a computer.
It's getting better, though.
It is getting better.
When you now, it's only been about 2 or 3 years for me personally where I now almost prefer an electronic book because I can underline it now easier than I could before. I can make notes in the margin now that are easier before, and I can flip back and forth. Sometimes I can show 4 pages on a document at once. So I think it's going to depend on a particular person's style. To be sure, sometimes writing something, the very physical act of writing it, puts it in your head differently than some other ways. I think that the benefit will be that the technology. There's a whole school of thought that's called universal design for education, and the concept of universal design is with technology, it's easier for students to pick how they're going to learn something, and it becomes more individualized because of the technology. So, I guess that's what I'd like to say.
Okay. Anybody else? Thanks, George.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Anybody from the public have a comment? All of you don't all raise your hands at once. Okay. All right. So now we'll segue on to Megan and brief transition. So play some music or something.
So while Megan's getting settled, this is the obviously the largest part of our budget. We're a human resource rich institution, and sometimes it's the part that keeps us all up at night, particularly since There's a lot of direct relationship between the staffing and the enrollment, and it doesn't always break the way you'd like. In fact, it almost never does. There are certain things that we can do early, so we'll do a staffing reconciliation in the fall. We'll do another staffing reconciliation around January, and then, generally speaking, the next thing you're looking at is high school selection. So once students begin to vote with their feet where they want, you begin to see where the numbers are there, and ultimately we get close to the end. We're not done, but this is our thinking to this point. Don't see a lot of shifts, and the process begins in part with enrollment, but then another part is what the various building people and so forth believe that they need going forward. And we'll talk about that as we go through. So, Megan?
Good morning. It's tough to follow technology. As Mr. Copeland pointed out, we're going to present today some of our staffing recommendations, but also want to share with you sort of how we think through the process, the complexity of the organization, the different needs, and hopefully answer any questions that you have today. So just to begin, we wanted to talk about the scope of our organization, which is not only serving students, but an organization that serves parents. In many cases, we're looking at students that come to the district with two parents or extended family, and those are people that we serve as well, and helping them navigate the growth of their children, the educational progress of their children, and so those are individuals that contact us and we engage with, as well as the students we see every day. Also, we have a community that we serve ranging from offering programs that are open to them, as well as facility use. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But those types of opportunities drive staffing needs. We need to have staff available to make sure our facilities are cleaned up, open, secure for those types of events. As some of this information is you may recognize from other presentations, just the scope of our physical locations drives staffing needs as well. So we have 10 schools, 15 total buildings, over 13 locations, 210 acres of land, which require staffing to maintain our grounds crews. Obviously, our number one charge is to deliver high-quality educational, co-curricular, and extracurricular experiences in a safe and welcoming environment for the students that come through our doors every day. But as I was alluding to, the organization also has, provides other services, and many of those services are mandated. So transportation services, for example, we transport 9,800 students daily to 130 different schools outside of the borders of our district. That's 1.2 million annual miles. Need staffing to support that. Those obligations, a food service system where we serve 3,000 meals a day. We manage a free and reduced lunch program that's mandated for 831 students. A health service system that provides services to over 13,000 students, not only our public schools, but 20 non-public schools and homeschool settings. I thought the statistic that our supervisor shared with me about over 40,000 student visits for illness in a school year, 8,000 for injuries, a technology system, as you heard about earlier today, over 7,000 instructional devices that need supported, over 9,000 help desk tickets that have been, handled year to date. Facility management system, over 8,700 hours of scheduled use of our facilities by community groups and other organizations. human resource system where we, during last school year, had 422 positions posted, over 18,000 applications that were received during that time, and a communication system where tens of thousands of notices, articles, and calendar updates are reviewed, posted, emailed, or otherwise delivered. Again, the scope of the district goes well beyond what happens in the classroom on a daily basis, and this was intended to share with you, just by way of some highlights, the scope and extent to which we provide services to not only our students, but other students and families and residents of the district. We have, because of the complexity of our organization, in most cases, experienced employees who serve many different roles. We have just over 1,500 employees, 773 professional staff, which includes teachers, counselors, psychologists, nurses, speech therapists, special education teachers, et cetera. We have just under 700 support staff, inclusive of secretaries, instructional aides, behavior aides, custodians, bus drivers, computer technicians, mechanics, and 72 administrators that supervise and oversee all of the activities and more that I earlier described. We have some other employment categories, just to give you a full scope of the roles that people may hold within our district. We have coaches and activity sponsors. I believe during the curriculum presentation, it was noted that there are 118 athletic teams and 96 different clubs and activities at the high school level alone, for which adults are responsible for overseeing and supervising the safety and of student athletes and students in those organizations. We have temporary and seasonal employment, such as summer crew, which we hire approximately 35 to 40 individuals per season to handle the summer cleaning, and substitutes. So when our regularly scheduled employees are not available, where there's a need for coverage for safety reasons, such as in the classroom, such as a bus driver, we have over 150 substitutes that are on our regular list of subs that come in and serve those duties so that our operations continue, and independent contractors that fill some more specialized needs, primarily with our special education population, but also provide services such as doing evaluations of students when needed, or when our current staff is not able to fulfill those roles. In many cases, the staffing that we do is driven by formula and need. For example, classroom teachers, the class size guidelines that we've discussed at the elementary level, we add when necessary, we move when or take away when those numbers drop. We haven't experienced that in recent years. We have seen an increase, especially at the elementary level, and that bubble is rising to the secondary level, but we've been adding staff at the classroom level, classroom teachers based on those class size guidelines. We have special ed staffing that's driven by Pennsylvania Department of Education caseload guidelines. We have custodial and maintenance personnel that there's a formula that drives the staffing of that. For example, our custodial personnel, there's a time study analysis based on the International Sanitary Supply Association standards. So we look very closely at what the needs are based on industry standards and staff accordingly. Bus drivers, when we add buses and add routes, because our enrollment grows, we add bus drivers to fill those seats. Instructional and behavior aides are in most cases driven by needs that are articulated in legal documents or individualized education plans. So in large part, these are our primary drivers of staffing that we do and need. As Mr. Copeland noted, salaries and benefits are budget drivers. The other night, the budget was presented with these figures. You see that that constitutes approximately 77% of the budgeted expenditures, and you see a breakdown of salary and benefit costs. And for the 2017-18 budget, it does include projected new personnel, which we'll discuss momentarily, of 10.5 professional staff, an additional 2, based on some reallocations of realized savings, and 3 support staff.
Megan, quick, just
Yes.
quickly, before we go on,
There's a typo. The salaries isn't 204. It's 124.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's that 204 number is a combination of both those.
okay. We'll fix that
Can
before we.
fix that before we post that. So look at all the savings we just realized. You're welcome. I'm not going to know who.
The benefits number, that includes our PSERS costs, or does it?
Yes. Oh.
Yes, it includes the pieces.
Just our half though, right?
No, it includes the total gross. You have to include in expenditures the total amount, and then we have to show on the revenue side the subsidy for it. But you have to record it at the gross figure.
Okay, great, thank you.
Well, since, if you don't mind, of the 80 million gross, do you know off the top of your head how much we'll get reimbursed, how much we would get reimbursed for in that year approximately?
Well,
Just for PSERS alone? If you don't know.
The pieces around 20 million you'll get reimbursed. Because that 80 million, excuse me, includes a bunch of different categories besides PSERS in there. Right, so right now you get about half of PSERS, which is about 20 million back. Of that, and that's reflected in the budget.
So wait, so half of that 80 million is PSERS?
No.
Because you said we get 20 million back, that means that would be 40 million total.
40 million is gross, roughly, is what, of the 80.
Of the 80, that's what I'm saying,
Right,
40
and
million.
you get 20, you get half
And then
of
we'll
the
get
40.
20
Correct,
back.
correct.
Right, so we spend 40 million on PSERS, we get some back. And the other 40 million is all the other benefits that we offer.
Which I think we talked about Monday, the healthcare will be about 27 million of that 80 million plus or minus. Am I getting it right?
Correct. However, that number would include any employee, that number, the 27 is a gross number. It doesn't include employee contributions. That number includes employee contributions. So employees pay a portion of the healthcare cost, which is reflected in here.
I apologize, I'm not quite
Okay,
following
all right,
that.
so-
So of the 80 million, I was thinking 27 million is our obligation to pay for healthcare as a school district. Therefore, let me kind of do it in my math. If we were to not give any health benefits at all, we could in theory reduce that 80 million by 27 million. I know it's legally impossible, I'm not asking, it's just a simple, or a math question on a hypothetical.
Yes.
Is 27 million of the 80 million the district's responsibility for healthcare? That's what I guess my question is. If you don't know, that's okay.
Yeah, it will be the district's responsibility, but there's a portion that is the employee's responsibility that's reflected in that number.
So much like the PSERS, in a sense, we get some money back from the state for PSERS in the 80. We sort of get some money back from.
27 million is paid by the employee.
Some of the 27 million is paid by the employee. Okay. Thank you.
I have one other PSERS question for Rick. So I just took 40 million and divided it by 1,500 and, what's the number? 1,540.
Cynthia.
And I got somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000. 40 million, all right, so 40 million is what, 40 million, right? Is how much we pay PSERS. We get 20 million back from the state, but 40 million is the PSERS bill. We have 1,540 employees. So 40 million divided by 1,540
Is an average.
is an average number per employee that we pay for PESers, okay? So that number's in the range of $25,000 a year?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd just like to point out, that's a big benefit. Would you like, you do get someone paid $25,000 a year. I would love someone to put $25,000 a year into my
I
retirement
mean,
fund.
you're paying 32.57% for every dollar an employee makes towards PESers. So add it up, because of the expense.
Well, I think, but Diane, as we all know, PESers is the fund today, at the state level, is vastly underfunded. So while I understand your math of dividing it by 1,500, but I think you have to look at the time and say, we're really collecting for a lot of, underfunding of teachers who retired from here and other places, in the last decade or so. So that student, that employee number is actually not 1,500. It's 1,500 today, but I think if you look at the 10, 20-year history of employees and former employees, that's where that number gets weird. It's just being born now in this particular time.
Yeah, I wasn't, in Pennsylvania at the time, but was it in the 90s when they did the massive not payments? Was it in the late 90s?
I was at the late 90s, early 2000s.
And what happened was PESers basically said, you don't have to put any money in there. The stock market's doing really good, and we're not going to insist that you put money. And if you were a district that didn't build up a reserve, within the next few years, you're going to have a tough time. And unfortunately, the state didn't build up a reserve. It just didn't put any money in. And everybody now is paying for that. And I think that's part of the issue. And
They
so
also changed the funding.
they changed the
They
funding.
changed the funding formula.
But when it.
No, I meant the payout formula.
Yeah.
They went from vesting in 10 years to vesting in 5.
And 5, and then back to 10, and so. But I guess my point is, the part of my concern is when folks look at that amount of money that the district has put in reserve for when we need to support programs because the PESer amount is going to climb. I'm saying, frankly, if the state had done that, if the state had put the money, then the amounts that we have to pay now wouldn't have been there.
No? Okay. So, moving along. We wanted to spend a little time talking about those projected personnel needs that were identified in the prior slide that are driven by the enrollment growth and also programmatic enhancements. We see both professional and support staff positions are listed here. And just to share sort of an overview of the process that we go through when we look at the needs Mr. Copeland described initially as we sat down that process. We did ask each department head, supervisor, principal to, through a form basically, to share with us what they believed their needs to be for the following year based on enrollment growth, based on other programmatic needs. Those requests were shared, vetted through directors, and ultimately presented to you through recommendations of the people in this room as we see the needs across all levels. And I can briefly walk through each one.
Yeah, I mean, we can, and supervisors are here, so the learning support teacher, this is growing enrollment at Harriton.
It's a combination. It's actually based on the student needs. We have a particular group of rising 8th graders that need intensive learning support, and so they will require a high level of support from a learning support teacher that we can't accommodate with our current staffing.
So that's not really enrollment numbers, it's just the particular needs of kids rising up through.
Correct. Well, your
Right.
enrollment numbers impact the other teachers.
Gotcha,
So-
gotcha. The Harriton High School and LMHS science, this is, as I understand, Scott, a continuing number of kids who want to double up on science classes. So the alternative is to say, no, you can't have another science class. We wanted to do that. This number was actually 2. And then the scheduling, they said, you know what, we can actually handle 1.5.
Correct. We have supported and want to continue supporting students that want to take multiple sciences. These are particularly 11th and 12th graders, but some 10th, that want to take, for example, a genetics course in addition to an AP physics course.
The Bala-Cynwyd Middle School and Welsh Valley, those are, based on my recollection from the presentations that the principals did, virtually all enrollment increases.
Enrollment and alignment of supports, correct.
Okay. Belmont Hills and perhaps other schools, but in discussing this with the principals, I have, in prior districts, had great success with behaviorists who work not necessarily with special needs students, who work with regular classroom students and their teachers in support of their behavioral programs, and sometimes to provide an alternative to classification. Belmont Hills in particular looks like a good place to pilot this program. I've had strong success with that over time. In Penn Valley and Penn Wynne, we have been providing reading and math specialists to the elementary schools kind of on every building gets the same amount. And I'm recommending that we move away from that to where buildings need the amount. These are Title I facilities, and these have higher needs than the other buildings at this point. The elementary schools, you guys know the instrumental piece better than I do. You want to speak to that?
There just an increase in a small increase in the amount of instrumental support or instrumental strings teacher at the elementary school serves multiple buildings, and the numbers have increased. There hasn't been a change in staff in an instrumental in many, many years.
Challenge teacher. What was that? Or that was.
Yeah, that's based on caseload requirements by PDE and our increasing number of students identified in need of gifted services.
And instructional aids while you're there?
Instructional aid support is driven by students' individualized needs as determined by their IEP teams. And so if students come in and need a one-to-one or additional support throughout the school day, we need instructional assistance to support with that.
And this is an area that can fluctuate. Do you have offhand the number of instructional aides you added this year, just through the course of the year? Do you know that offhand?
I don't know from the start of the year. We entered the year at a decreased number, so we do try to attempt based on need when we can. I don't want to misspeak.
Okay.
I can definitely
Sure.
get that to you.
Okay.
We have seen an increase throughout the year, though.
And the custodial support is Bala-Cynwyd Middle School, I think, right?
Correct.
This is by adding the additional temporary classrooms, looking to have some custodial support for those.
Can I just make
Sure.
a clarifying comment? Again, one thing that we hear frequently is budgeting for worst-case scenario. And going into September, we had an expectation of a certain level of need for one-to-one aides or instructional assistants. As we find because of IEPs, we don't need them. So of course we don't hire them, but then we may need them moving forward. And so we're filling that. So there's your breakage number that you like that term breakage you like to use, but that's yet another example of where that breakage.
There's breakage there, and there was an earlier slide that talked about the number of people who were hired during the course of the year, 400 and something people.
Oh, right,
Just in
422
general.
positions that are posted.
So
Correct.
people leave, you're almost never fully staffed, and so that's the other area that the breakage comes in.
Right, and we don't like to pit needs of one student against needs of another student. So we want to make sure that we're properly budgeted so that we can cover, so that we don't find ourselves in a budget situation where we're skimming money off of other students to pay for what we're mandated,
Sure.
federally
Sure.
mandated to provide. So.
Yeah, the next slide, I think, is important because it indicates there are still needs that are out there. In terms of administration, I think our biggest concern right now are middle schools. The current support for students hasn't increased in a number of years, and the number of students has significantly increased. You want to speak to that?
Sure. The administrative staffing at the middle schools has remained the same, roughly 400 students ago. So that's many years, but as we've seen that 400 student increase, the counseling and administrative staff has remained constant.
And so he has advocated strongly. So before we're done with this meeting in June, there may be some changes where if we can work it in, I'm looking at, for example, the possibility of a dean of students, which doesn't require an administrative certificate to provide some support as opposed to an assistant principal. We might look to that situation. That's why that's in parentheses there. We're concerned that some of our elementary schools might get like one assistant principal one day per week. And it's getting to be a strain because at the building level, I know one principal, every time I drop in to visit, she's in an LEA meeting, and they're not getting to do the things except, be in meetings. And so we have to be concerned about that. I know, adding administration isn't necessarily a popular thing, but it makes the ship a state run, and that's a concern.
I was just going to ask you to talk, and you started to get there, to talk a little bit more, because people think of administrators, a building principal, who just makes sure that all the pieces are in place, and the fact that there's 400 more students really doesn't matter that much because it's making sure the pieces are in place. But the administrators do way more. There's a huge demand on time.
Huge demand on time, as I indicate. If you've got an elementary school of 700 students, and you're trying to meet the needs of parents when they're calling, when they have concerns, when no problem is a little problem when it's happening to a kid, and you've got to and you want to take the time to do that. I had a question, principal, the other day. It was important, and I actually needed the answer. I couldn't wait, and you find the principal. Where's the principal? Principal's doing an observation. Principal's in a meeting with parents on LEA. Could you speak to it in terms of the middle school particularly?
Sure. So as staff has increased, teacher evaluation increased. The teacher evaluation responsibilities are significant. But with student increases, administrators serve a formal role in the LEA process for LEA local. The LEA serves as the administrative liaison to an IEP meeting or a GIP, in some cases a GIEP meeting or a 504 meeting. So it's very common for an administrator to be sitting in multiple IEP or 504 meetings throughout the day. So as your student, and Ms. Schaefer has a slide representing a little bit of the distribution of student responsibilities in one school to show you an example. But as the student body increases, your number of students with IEPs increases, your number of students with 504s increases. We obviously want to continue to meet those needs and have provide a high level of service and connection for those families. That is a time investment, and there's a student discipline piece to that. That's not what's often, I think, misperceived as the tipping point. Typically isn't, but it is a reality that if you add 400 more students to a building, you're going to be dealing with additional disciplinary issues. And you'd say the same about a counseling, especially at the middle school, where the role of the relationship between the counselor and the administrator in supporting students and families is often very much shared. That caseload has increased for both of those.
So we may be coming back with a different model, but And in case the principals are watching, I can tell you Dr. Everslog was a strong advocate for you. He did not win this round because I wanted to make sure. I was really concerned about some of the inequities in terms of, reading specialists, math specialists, and so forth and so on. But we're not done with that. And you can see some of the other requests that have been made. For instance, I think the middle schools were looking for Spanish teachers. They think they can make do this year, but they're sort of saying, but next year, something's got to happen there. The writing centers, I'm putting that off in abeyance. I had a meeting with some of our alumni, and we spent a lot of time discussing what they thought, we could have done better when they were in school, and support for writing was one of those things. I have asked for a revamping of our research writing requirements, so that very soon students will be expected to do at least 2 research papers a year for all 4 years that they're in school. But to make that a successful situation, we do want to enhance our writing support. I was putting money aside for support within each of the 2 high schools. The supervisor, the director, and the 2 chairs, in working with their departments, are looking at a peer support model that we'll be talking more about in CCOB, but just a placeholder there. We spend a lot of time in a growing school district sort of adding staff to keep to where we were, but I think we can't not stop expanding our program, even though it's a stretch on our resources. Again, it may not seem like a big thing, but more kids on the playground. I'm looking down at support. You want to make sure there's more supervision there. So we're taking a look at that. The same thing with campus aides, particularly when students came over to the district administration building to supply security and so forth there. That situation was taken care of. One of the things that I left out of the budget presentation Monday that I'll try and provide going forward, I talked about a number of the enrollment increases that had taken place, Gladwin we added on to, and so forth and so on. I was reminded that post Sandy Hook, there was a number of safety initiatives that were put in place in the schools to make sure that there were vestibules and so forth and so on. I will do that. I finally realized what I had written out here and couldn't write in my handwriting before. Additional bus aids and so forth and so on. So this is a list of stuff that didn't make the cut, but we wanted to make sure you saw that we still have pending needs.
And I just note on the volunteer coordinator piece, and I meant to mention it earlier when we were talking about sort of employment categories. It's not an employment category, but I think it's worth noting that since the mandate that volunteers have clearances, we've had to process 975 year-to-date volunteer clearances, which is being done by current staff, but it's also something that needs to get renewed and monitored, and that's just the paperwork piece. And the next step, ideally, is to get to a place where we can be a little more intentional with how we use volunteers. So I just wanted to note that as well as another driver of staffing needs. So I wanted to just walk through quickly to give you a glimpse of how we look at staffing a building. It kind of speaks to what we've already covered, but as an example, this is Penn Valley, and each elementary school we look at enrollment in a very similar way. That top line, or the lightest shaded line, is current enrollment. You can see in that gold band at the top is our staffing guidelines for each grade. The bottom is what the projections are, and this is the the projections based on the highest projected enrollments that we've received from our demographers. So it's a combination of the two. And the middle is sort of what we're tracking right now. The A with the star is indicating this is sort of actually where we are right now and looking into next year and moving students that are in that top band into the next grade along, and then adding new registrations as they come in. So what you may notice right away is in first grade, compared to that bottom band, we're already over that highest projected enrollment when we move our kindergartners up and add in the new registrations. So it looks right now like we'll be adding another section there ahead of what those projections suggested we may need to do. In fifth grade, we're still at holding at 5 sections, but we're one away from needing the 6th section, which was projected. But assuming we do see another student come in at the 5th grade level, that means that we are already over 1 section over those highest projected numbers at Penn Valley.
This is the problem when people state things like, you've got all these empty seats, and you don't have to worry about anything for, years and years to come. So having space, if I run out of space at Penn Valley in the 2nd grade, I can't move them where there's space in the 5th grade program. It just doesn't work that way. So.
Right. So also, this generally represents the 670-some students that we have at Penn Valley. Wanted to give you sort of a visual of the makeup of the students by classification. And the ones that I selected correspond to the data that we report at the federal level. So you can see, and it's not to say that that students may not fall into more than one category, but gives you an idea of among those 670 plus students there, what the students that may have additional needs that we are supporting at the building level. You see our ESL students that may have 504 plans, students that are on our free and reduced lunch meal plan, students with IEPs, students that are identified as gifted, and students that fall into a category that the federal government terms chronically absent. And I bring that up again because it does relate to the attendance policy we've been talking about in some ways, because these students are students that have, over the course of the year, last year, it had 15 or more days of absence. So, I'm sorry? 15. That's the federal standard for that definition. But I do bring that up because the new mandates that we're under regarding the truancy law will require us to take additional steps. And technically, assuming, if there were no other, some extraordinary circumstances, if this is just a student that is not coming to school, we need to make sure that they have, we've sent notices, that they have a school attendance improvement plan in place, that we're monitoring that we're taking steps to bring families in. So those are all new steps that are being imposed without the benefit of having any funding to support that. So I bring that up because that is a population that we would be serving. I didn't, as I could have done, I suppose, is note that this doesn't include, the students that, maybe recently experienced trauma in their lives, that are going, their family's going through a divorce or other situation, that are, injured or ill at any given time during the day, that, there's an investigation going on of a alleged bullying incident, or, a student that's, come to the office crying and the reason is uncertain. So all of that plays into the idea that we have reasons for the supports that we provide to students above and beyond just what we do at the classroom level, because one, there's either a requirement under law to do that, or because there are just needs that we believe as a school community are important to address, work with families, and meet the needs of all students that walk through the door of our schools.
Megan, I know we talk about this in other forums,
back?
but since we have it in front of us, can you just explain the difference between IEP and 504, or maybe Kim?
I'll let the expert.
Yeah.
So for students that have either a 504 plan or IEP, they have an identified disability. The distinction between the two is a 504 plan is really accommodations. So what accommodations need to be put in place for them to be able to access the general education curriculum? Students that have a
So can you give 2 examples?
extended time on tests would be an example. Preferential seating, so they're closer to the areas of instruction if they have distractibility issues. For students with IEPs, those are students who have a disability that rises to the level that they require instruction in their area of need that is beyond what's provided within general education. So there's a direct instruction component to that through a special education teacher that makes the distinction with the IEP. So in your IEP, you'd have goals that are related to those areas of need that the special education team is explicitly working on.
Thank you.
So as I guess, teed up was the idea that as we look at those classroom numbers, we also look at those needs and then try to staff a school accordingly. This gives you a rough idea of those other positions that you may see at the building level, and I apologize, that font is incredibly small, and I'll work on that before we post it. But the idea is, we're supporting students different ways because of, what their needs are, either driven by legal requirements or by life and the way they present when they come through our doors every day. I also wanted to use the donut graphic like George. A little bit of a closer look at human resources, because we are talking about staffing. We do have a department that is responsible for the recruitment, hiring, and onboarding of all of those staff members. As I mentioned, we had 422 postings in the 15-16 school year, which, a corresponding number of applicants, actually not corresponding, a large number of applicants for those positions that need to be reviewed. Just the pure management of setting up multiple interviews, and I'll talk about that a little in a moment. But there's a lot of coordination that goes on in moving people into positions in the district. We also have compliance responsibilities and investigations, which are legally mandated or mandated by agreements that we have in place. Benefits management, we noted the cost associated with benefits. We have a business benefits specialist that's primarily responsible for managing all of those benefits that are in place. Payroll processing, both federal and state requirements to make sure that people are paid in a timely and accurate fashion. Substitute coordination, those positions that need filling on a day-to-day basis, making sure we have teachers in front of our students every day to the best of our ability. We have mandated screenings that we need to do not only for employees but volunteers, as I mentioned earlier, as well as extensive state and federal reporting obligations that we do. And this is just sort of a summary of some of the highlights that the Human Resources Department is responsible for. Our hiring process, we believe, is a rigorous one for any position that we post. It does occur year-round. We post positions on our website, may advertise externally depending on the position. We attend recruiting fairs. Applications are received and reviewed through our web-based system, and this is our initial screening process. So there's a paper screening process that's may be done by the administrator or supervisor that's involved in or overseeing that position. Then initial screening interviews are typically conducted, which may be shorter, but it's the first face-to-face meeting with a potential candidate. Those successful candidates move forward to more extensive interviews and screenings for teachers. This typically involves one or more building level interviews with principals, department chairs, demonstration lessons, and writing samples, among other things. The recommended candidate moves forward to interviews with HR and, in the case of teachers, with either the assistant superintendent or superintendent. And before an offer is extended, HR ensures references are checked, background clearances are processed, and all other job requirements are met. Then the administration makes a recommendation to the board for approval, and then we do proceed with an onboarding process that for our teachers, for example, includes our new teacher program and mentors assigned, et cetera. So that's a brief overview of that process, which may be generally not less extensive, but more extensive in the event that we're hiring an administrator. We've done focus groups, surveys, et cetera, for those types of positions as well. Everybody's Google. We do. That's part of that background check clearance and job requirements. So we do our social media review as well. And finally, wanted to touch on partner schooling, which we've done in other venues, but we do see it as a way to alleviate enrollment pressure. We have seen that, and we will continue to use that this year. This is just as a brief overview where at a certain point in time this year, it's a May 1st deadline. We will cap sections at the elementary level where they stand and use our discretion with some limitations to assign students who are enrolled thereafter, to the extent that those new students would push beyond the cap and exceed the class size guidelines, to a partner school, which would be another elementary school in the district that would have space available for those students. We've had a few instances of partner schooling this year. The only modification for next year is that we moved up the deadline from June 1 to May 1 to give us even more flexibility in being able to try to manage the sections at the elementary level. And at this time, are there any questions?
Let me just say that we combined these two presentations because it was my feeling that they were going to be much shorter than the others, and we were going to be able to...
We're doing okay. We're a little longer, but, Maureen.
I've had people ask about possibly filling the empty seats through sort of a volunteer sister program. Has there been discussion, and can you talk about some of the logistical issues with that?
Well, part of the logistical issues would be, well, let me step back. Right now, the two schools that I'm most concerned about in terms of facilities are Marion and Gladwin, where we're just up against it. You could ask for volunteers. The question I would ask back is, would we be providing transportation for that? And if we would, we'd have to make the decision fairly late, I think, in the year. And if we were providing transportation, that might be a significant drain. Then the question becomes, what happens in the next series of years? So we had space. Let's take Penn Valley, for instance. Right now, I think our biggest pressure at Kinwood was, I think, first grade.
Yes.
Where we had a number of new students who moved into a brand new apartment complex. And they seem to all be going into first grade. And I think to keep them in the same feeder pattern, we put them in Marion. We're concerned about Marion. The space is actually open in Penn Valley. That's out of the feeder pattern. That's one complexity. The second complexity is, do they stay in Penn Valley the whole time? And if they do, what happens when Penn Valley's numbers in second, third, or fourth grade go up? Do we leave somebody who volunteered in Penn Valley, or do we say, oh no, you got to go back because there are people maybe who moved across the street from Penn Valley? So those are some of the logistics that, and we're thinking about that. We're thinking about that. If somebody right now volunteers on a year-to-year basis, we do take into consideration whether they go, but they've been providing their own transportation at this point. And it's been, I don't think we get very many at the elementary level, do we?
Anything else? Super?
We went over the costs of staffing and everything. I just wanted to, if you could give a brief overview of the negotiation process and how and when that's handled?
Sure. In Lower Merion School District, a large percentage of our staff are members of our Lower Merion Education Association. So it's a little bit different than other school districts where you may see a support staff union or secretarial union. Everyone is in the same bargaining unit. So those, when the current contract is set to expire at the end of this school year. And so the negotiation process, as is typical with any district, has already begun. And so, as is typical, things like salary, benefits, and conditions of employment are always on the table for discussion. And I don't know how, is that the, I mean, I can go on, but that's generally the process that we follow here, and we are engaged right now in that process. And that does cover, as I said, the majority of our employees are members of that association.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I don't, if you have it at your fingertips, if you don't, that's fine too, but you did say some kids were in the partner school program. Yes. We are doing some, I think, busing between, do you just have, at fingertips, 10, 15 kids?
Less than 5.
Less than 5 this year. But it could be 10 next, we clearly don't know that yet.
Well, we don't know that. We've moved, what happened was we got significantly more students than we expected during the summer of 2015. Yes, that's the year I came. No, they didn't follow me, so don't blame me. The projection was that we would get another significant number of students this year. They didn't come in the large numbers, and we were able to make it through on this date. By moving the partner schooling back, we think we're going to have more students. So the real question would be, how many students are, in other words, so I'm waiting, sort of holding my breath as we stumble across the line to May 1st. Once May 1st happens, then it's how many students have begun the registration process. That will tell us pretty much I would guess, our worst case scenario to a certain degree, because anybody after that date who hasn't begun the registration process goes into the queue for that. Do the numbers for this include the students who are in the queue, who have begun the registration process?
Yes.
Yes. So they're covered. So as long as not a whole lot of people come within the next week or so, we can sort of hold our breath. And I think we'll have enough to go on then. However, if the projections hold, we could have some significant numbers of students who are going to be. And by significant, I don't mean 100. I mean, 15, 20. That's where we get into the big numbers.
I have another. I've got it. I just haven't. And I matter if you. My understanding is, even though we do 10-day enrollment, we pick up kids almost all year long. And to that point, I met a Penguin parent who has a son or a daughter at Penguin. In March, son or daughter came home, we got a new kid in our class. So even though I recognize our buildings are full, there is, as you point out, some space in some that will be taken, that may be available in September, but could very easily be filled by April, March.
Yes.
And I think people need to recognize, even though we key off 10-day numbers, it's not like we can lock the doors
No,
and say
it's-
that's it. We have to deal with who shows up.
It's not a stagnant situation. It's fluid, and it's highly unpredictable. Megan has said to me that registration will tell you, particularly multiple occupancy units are going to hit their peak during the summer. There's one facility, I haven't had the chance to ask, but I'm wondering if the number of students we're getting out of it is related to parents who may be attending graduate programs at St. Joseph's University, because it's kind of close there. So there are all kinds of situations. I know the board and some members of the public have heard me say this before. We tend to be reactive. We don't have a planning board that says we're going to zone a particular place and you can only live there. And folks are going to come, and we tend to have to, react to that in a fluid way.
We're reactive, but we're reactive because we have to be, not because we want to be.
Well, I think that the partner schooling was a way of saying, okay, we have to react to something, but what can we have our control over? Again, it was last spring that the administration went to the board and said, maybe we ought to recommend hold off on construction, because let's see how the partner schooling goes. Let's see how the N+1 goes. Let's see what we can do. And so it is somewhat frustrating when someone says, you ought to do X, Y, and Z, and you're already doing, X, Y, and Z. I feel like the guy who's crossing the street and somebody on the other side is saying, hey, I think it'd be a good idea if you cross the street. Well, I'm doing that. And so by doing the best we can with demographic projections, doing the best we can about conservative budgeting, doing the best we can about our enrollment control in our facilities, I think we can do that. It's not going to help if we get a flood of kids who enter Marion or a flood of children who enter Gladwin, and if they do it, at the right times, we got a problem. And I also need to remind folks that in some cases, we've already made accommodations to expand space. And in some cases, that means not every music teacher has a room. Some maybe music on a cart, or world language on a cart, or art on a cart, or something of that nature. I know schools have lost their large group instruction areas and so forth. So we've already, even if we can make do with the situation that we have now, it's because we've already made accommodations somewhere along the line.
I have a number of questions. Most of them should be quick fact questions. How many applications do we generally get for a teaching position?
We had an example. For a kindergarten opening we had last June, we received 337 applications.
And is that sort of a
That
typical?
would, yes, I would say yes.
I would say
there's some.
Latin, you're going to get 10.
You see, we have, more teachers are certified in that, would be qualified for the position, whereas if it's a physics position, you're not going to get 337 applicants.
Right.
We'll see less, but for elementary positions, yes.
You're special.
Are reading specialists and the like under, and the math, what do we call them, math specialists in the elementary schools, are they under spec ed or are they under classroom teachers?
Classroom teachers.
They're considered classroom teachers?
They're all.
Like in your charts?
It's the general education intervention, so
Yes.
they fall under general ed.
Okay, so when we see for the Penn Valley, where's your little
the donut?
Your
Yeah, there's
donut.
3. So at each elementary school has 2 reading specialists and 1 math support specialist who provide general education interventions.
Okay, so they're not for kids with IEPs. They might,
They
I guess I do want to make a clarifying statement. So it's a general education intervention, but sometimes students with disabilities that have an IEP access that support. So I'll give an example because I think that'll make it the most clear. Say we have a student who has a specific learning disability in reading. They would receive their supports through special education as identified within their IEP. That same student may need some support in the area of math that isn't related to his or her disability, and they could receive that intervention through the math specialist because it's not related to their disability.
do we have any teachers on special assignment anymore? Or have we gotten rid of that?
We do have a few teachers, again, in Ms. Fraser's department who are serving as coordinators for special education and in different roles. Those are the only, well, Mr. O'Brien, I guess classify him as also on special assignment, who coordinates our IB program at Harriton. So I think there's a total of 4 teachers that fall into that category across the district.
So
I'm
they're
looking-
basically hired as professional staff on the professional scale, but they're actually serving sort of an administrative position?
I would say a quasi-administrative position, but they primarily provide, with the exception of maybe Mr. O'Brien's, more of a program manager, crude term, but
International Baccalaureate Coordinator.
coordinator,
Right,
correct.
but that's one, so.
And then in the special ed, I would say they're providing more support directly to teachers and staff and implementation of IEPs and.
Correct. And some specific areas, like so early intervention and transition. for
So they're
older
working
students.
less with students and more with teachers?
That is correct.
And then on slide 4, which is that, it's a list of experienced employees. No, is that the, yes. Is there a way to get a number associated with each one of those categories, a budget number? Or is that, there's so much overlap and confusion that wouldn't be doable?
So with each of the so coaches and EPER as
It's
categories
like
or within
773 professional staff, so what's that budget number? 699 support staff, what's that number? 72 administrators, what's that number?
We,
Do the seasonal folks get benefits?
no.
So is full-time considered over the course of a year? So they don't reach the full, they don't reach, what is it, part-time that you?
There's a
so
number of
what,
hours for
50%?
support. It's a number of hours for support, 900, which they would not meet. And then it's for professional, it's a 0.5 position or more that would be eligible for benefits under our collective bargaining agreement.
So is that, Vic, is that are they numbers you can find, or Megan? I don't know who would be the best person to come up with that.
We do have some of the breakdown in front of me, so that large number that you saw that was wrong, the 124.
It's on board docs, by the way.
Yeah,
I will make sure that gets changed as soon as we're finished here. So, for example, like the EPER totals are approximately 2.7 million. If that's the kind of breakdown. It's a little bit difficult because you do have to make sure that you're not double counting staff members that also serve in those roles and that their total compensation, it's a little bit of a going back and double checking that we're not seeing that we've
So the problem
counted in
is,
the.
if I'm a teacher at Lower Merion High School and I coach 2 sports, my total compensation is going to make it look like, you see what I'm saying?
so you have to subtract out
So
the
you gotta
EPR
subtract
stuff from the
Right.
professional.
Right.
You got yelled at.
I got yelled at.
All right, so we have to subtract
We can look
out.
at, and at a breakdown that we can provide. I don't have it on the fly, so to speak, but we can break
We
it
could
down.
get you a
I-
we could get you a non-precise.
Okay, yes,
that?
and, put that little approximately thing in
Yeah.
front of it. I just, again, as part of this process, we're trying to understand the budget, where the numbers are coming from, and see things in the big picture as well as individually. And so this would help me see the big picture. Any other board questions? No? Do you have any questions? I have one question. You have to come up. Sorry, and you have to identify yourself, please, and where you're from. Or you can sit down there, it's fine.
Yeah, just have a seat.
Yeah.
Terry Spar, I live in Ardmore. You said the collective bargaining process is in the process right now?
Correct.
Who's responsible for negotiating that, and how's that communicated?
On the part of the district?
Yeah.
Well, there are administrators and legal counsel that represent the interests of the board in that process. So there's a team that does the negotiation on the part of the district.
We have a board negotiator.
Not a board member negotiator.
No, the board negotiator is an attorney. Mrs. Schaefer and Mr. Orlando are the main people.
And then it's communicated how?
It's communicated when there's a resolution.
And when is resolution? Okay, thank you.
My secretary's going to want your name. I can't go back without it.
And where you live. Any other questions? Any other questions from board admin? No. Any other questions from the board or administration? Okay.
We have one
Bob?
more presentation.
Oh, we do?
No, not today, not today. Special education will take place in the
right.
evening a couple of weeks from now. May what?
May 17th.
May
May
17th.
17th?
Okay.
All right, so May 17th, special education will be focused on 7 PM in the evening in this room.
It'll be student services, special
student ser-
education, including gifted education.
Okay, great, thank you. So with that, thank you very much, everyone, and we're adjourned.